Okay, and also Beitsa, eggs. Okay, Kadera and pots. Okay, for Iya and eggs. Okay, Ferita in barrels or barrels. Klein smoching it Kadera Bakiats.
Yeah, that's a new halacha, so let's wait on that. So what's he saying over here?
You can't place these things upon something that holds them. That's low, that's empty in the middle. It's like building.
Let's start with Rav Yehuda. What was Rav Yehuda saying? At the bottom of Lamed Beis, Hamid Beis, very last line, Amar Rav Yehuda, Haimadurata, this bonfire.
Yeah, you can hold the bonfire from above to below, it's okay, but not from below to above. So
Sorry, what?
from above to below, it's fine.
From top down?
Yeah.
How do you build it from the top down?
You hold the planks in place and then you structure them in a way that you put the others below.
So basically you're putting what first, structurally speaking?
Top first.
Yeah, but it has a name in halacha. What we're talking about, the malacha that we're trying to avoid here is what? Binyan, but also ohel, right? They're interchangeable. Building an ohel, building a binyan, and therefore the heter of Rav Yehuda for what he's aiming at here is to first do what in terms of the malacha of binyan? You're first putting what part of the structure? Roof, right? The God. And then the walls. So in terms of a bonfire, you put the top layer of wood that would be like a roof, as it were, and then you structure the other ones around it towards the bottom, it would be like the walls. That's mutter. Why?
Building.
Rashi says, yep. No, first milamata lamala, Rashi says, start from below and then go up. The sadir. To arrange
wood of the walls first.
Right. La'asos, to then make upon that a god. First to make the walls of the bonfire, so to speak, and then to make the roof on top of that. That is...
So it is also for building Shadder Binyan Hu. It's a way to do a building. It's a way to build it.
Okay, so now do you have a better answer, Shabbatai?
Is something wrong with my first answer?
Yeah, it was a little bit too vague.
Yeah, you put the roof on first and then the walls.
Because
building you put the walls first and the roof follows.
Because what?
You put the walls first and
Is
the
to
roof
do what?
to build.
Yeah, but Rashi uses a word that's very important here.
Okay.
Derech.
That's the way of building.
The way.
Yeah.
You have to avoid the normal way, and you're aiming to rather do what we call in halacha. What do you call that when we don't do it the normal way?
Shinoi.
Shinoi! Bingo!
What?
That's the word I was waiting to hear.
Ah, why did you say so?
I did. I gave you 2 chances.
That was so obvious with what you,
Well, it was obvious because, I'm waiting for something more than just that it is or isn't a binyan. Rashi's actually mashma that it is a binyan with, even if you do it out of order, it is a binyan, it's just not the derech. Right? Sometimes you do something. I think we once mentioned that the Iglei Tal, famous sefer that discusses all the malachas of, well, actually doesn't get around to all of them, but you get a very thorough, in-depth approach to the ins and outs of the malachas of Shabbos, and of course, indirectly that would affect Yom Kippur as well, in the cases where it's applicable. And I think I once explained that in terms of shinui, there's two types of shinui. Remember ever discussing this?
Yes, in the second paragraph.
I can't remember where, but I know it's an important discussion, so I try to get to it every once in a while.
Like when a person does something, it shouldn't be too hard, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about two different kinds of shinui. One is, let's say, a lower grade shinui, and the other is a higher grade shinui.
One's klachayat, right?
Those are just words, but I want you to explain to me, if he does a certain type of shinui, it's a shinui, but it's not as high a level of shinui. Maybe it's sufficient for certain things. And then if you do a different kind of a shinui, it's a higher grade shinui. Can you think of the two types of shinui that I've discussed in the past, possibly?
Talking about carrying things on the shoulder.
I don't want specifics. I want a general description of a kind of a shinui that would be less of a severe shinui, but it still might be good enough in some halachas to do that shinui. Should I let the cat out of the bag?
I haven't heard of this.
But if I say it this time, it will register?
Yeah, I can't remember the time of the first.
Okay, but that's obvious to me now. But now I'm going to say it, and I hope next time at least it will be remembered. So I'll try to say it this time in a memorable way. One type of shinui is very similar to this. I did it in the opposite order, but the result is the same. You hear that?
Yeah.
Yes. But I don't want you to remember the specific as much as the general rule. I am changing the order of events, but the result is the same. And there's a different type of a shinui where I do it so radically different that even the result is different. Okay? I'll give you an example of the first one. Well, first of all, that is, I think, exactly what Rashi's saying over here. If you make the walls and then put the roof, or you put the roof and then the walls, is it going to be different in the end? Is it going to be a different result, or it's going to look the same to the naked eye? It looks the same. That means the result is not different.
Yeah.
So this kind of a shinui, would you call it a higher grade shinui or a lower grade shinui?
Lower grade.
Lower grade. Because it's not really changing the binyan. And when you say it's not a binyan, I would beg to differ. The result is a binyan. You have a binyan. You have walls and a roof. Right? Maybe not the conventional walls and the roof, but in our sugya, you have not changed the result. The one that's mutter, it's not mutter because the result is different. The result is the same, whether you put the walls first and then the roof, or the roof first and then the walls. You see what I'm saying? So when you said it's not a binyan, it wasn't just you weren't saying the word I was expecting. It was actually wrong.
It is a binyan.
It is a binyan.
In a different way.
Right. That's what I'm trying to say. That if you see Rashi in that way, you'll see that he is actually saying it's a binyan. It is binyan. But I'm allowing you to do this because you're doing it in the opposite order. That's enough of a shinui, even though it's a low grade shinui. Because what would be a higher grade shinui? If I do a shinui, that actually makes it come out different. Okay? I'll give you an example of that, for example. There's a machlokus about writing chol hamoed. Have you ever heard about that machlokus?
Yes.
If you're allowed to write a note to someone on chol hamoed or not? It's a shaila. It's a big shaila amongst the poskim. Maybe writing is considered like a professional thing, so therefore when you write, maybe you're actually doing a malacha that's not really permitted.
What about sending on WhatsApp? Is that right?
Try to concentrate on what I'm saying, so that next time I ask about the two types of shinui, it won't blank on you. You like remember what I said because you weren't thinking about a WhatsApp. You're actually thinking about what I'm saying, and then after it's imprinted on your mind, then we can talk about WhatsApp.
Okay.
First, get what I'm saying, and then we'll jump to what you're saying. Okay? So the first thing is that it's a question, right? It's questionable if you can write chol hamoed. Okay, some people say you can, some people say you can't. Okay? So what do many people do to write Chol HaMoed? To avoid that shaila? Because it could be a shaila deraisa, according to many opinions. Malacha, if the malacha that's Asr Chol HaMoed is actually Asr Midaraisa, according to many opinions. That's a machlokas itself, so we won't get into that. But, so some people do what? Have you ever seen someone do a shinui on writing Chol HaMoed? Yes. I can tell you people do. Maybe not enough people do it to make it like so obvious to all people. Obviously you didn't see it, but maybe, I'm bringing it up as a point.
If someone's a lefty, can you write with the right hand? Is that a shinui?
That would probably be a shinui. But what I'm trying to suggest to you is the following. If I hold it differently, okay, and I try to write by holding the pencil or pen differently in my hand, is that a shinui?
Yes.
It actually might be the higher grade shinui. Why?
If you write in what?
If I hold the pen or pencil differently, if I normally hold it like this and now I'm holding it like this or some other way, because the actual writing might be a more wobbly writing, not as beautiful, not as flowing. Again, it could be, there's a different standard in hospitals, perhaps for pikuach nefesh, or even if things aren't pikuach nefesh, perhaps there are leniencies. But I'm just saying, theoretically, if you would try to accustom yourself to do it, it's not so hard, because you can still write the same exact thing by holding the pen a bit differently. That's what I'm trying to say. And you might even accomplish a higher grade shinui, of the handwriting being a bit less professional looking, but still get everything across that you want to. Some people actually do a different kind of a shinui. You can ask yourself which level of shinui would that be called. They tilt the paper. So instead of, let's say you have regular lines, if you write on a bit of an angle, it's not going straight across the line, it's going a bit against the line, which might drive people crazy when you try to read your writing, but at least that might even be called a shinui in the result. Because even though the handwriting per se is not different, but it's coming out on the page, a different kind of handwriting. Some people might call it the lower grade shinui, more like here, you're coming out with the same handwriting, just sort of in a different perspective. But I'm just saying, the reason why I'm stressing the two different kinds of shinui, and again, this is not my kiddush, it's the Igle Tau that brings us down, is that very often we say, oh, if you do a shinui, it's mutter, okay? The problem with just being that general about shinui making things mutter is that you have to realize, first of all, which kind of shinui you're talking about. Are you in an area that you need a higher grade shinui? You have to be conscious that the result should be a bit inferior, if that's true. But if you don't need that kind of level of shinui, the higher level, like here, we don't need that. To make it mutter here on Yom Tov, I don't need that, right? Because perhaps, what would be a reason why I don't need the higher grade shinui perhaps here? What did we already say? Is this a binyan doraisa or dorabanan?
This is the one.
Why?
So why is not supposed to build on Shabbos, right?
I want you to use this sugya. Look inside. Force yourself to look in the words and see what the Gemora already is HaKodesh. It's arai. Arai. Right? It's not kavah.
So it's
not kavua.
anything that's arai is also
The ohel arai, at least. Ohel. Not everything. Maybe there's certain things that even if they're arai, right? Like, for example, a knot. If you do a knot, that's not going to remain there for more than 24 hours, and some people say it's not a deraisa, it's only derabbanan. But I'm not saying that's a general heter, I'm just giving an idea that sometimes in malacha this will make a difference, sometimes it won't make a difference, and then even if it does make a difference, you have to know how long does it have to be there to be called kavah. 24 hours, if I leave it there for 24 hours, does that make it kavua, or it has to be there for more than a few days? I'm just saying it's a question, you have to look into that. But here the Gemora said specifically, in the case of what? On which case did the Gemora said it's not an oil kavua, it's an oil arai, it's a binyan arai, Remember in which case we had to say that to explain why it's mutter?
The case of
Chair.
No, not exact. Oh, yeah, but that was a case that was going to be usher. That was case usher. What's the case that we're saying? You know why it's mutter? Because, first of all,
The key said.
the toilet, the portable toilet, right? The stones, remember? Truly?
yes. Rabbi.
That we said, first of all, this is not an ohel kavah, it's an ohel arai. That makes it what? If it's only an ohel arai, it's only what? Only Rabbanan. And then we said, oh, and for that case, it could still be mutter even to make an ohel arai, which is normally asur midrabanan, because the Rabbanan were mako for kavod abrius. Very good. So now, I'm just borrowing one of those concepts to over here. I'm saying, oh, so then we already know that the ohelim that we're talking about in this sugya, for the most part, I mean, it won't mean every single case is that way, but I think most cases are, and you can think about each case and see if it is or not. But I think it's still here talking about which kind of an ohel, talking about a bonfire. I'm arranging wood in a certain way, they're almost like walls and a roof. Is that an ohel kavah or an ohel arai? It should be arai. Because why do people make bonfires? To light it up. So in a few minutes, this is going to be gone. It's going to be a log bomer fire or whatever, right? It's not going to be, it's not, the walls are not going to remain for very long over here, right? I assume that's part of the cheshbon, if when we try to analyze if something's a kavah or a rise, how long is it going to remain? If you're making it now to use on Yom Tov, that means in a little while it'll be gone. The walls won't be there, the roof won't be there, it'll just be a bonfire. Right?
Yes. So the Rabbanim made even the Raya asur.
That's right.
In case people came to. Okay.
That's right. For the general reasons.
Except for this particular thing.
Okay, but I'm saying maybe we can even apply that here in this new heter, which Rashi says the name of that heter is Shinui, right? I said maybe this Shinui is not the higher level Shinui, it's a lower level Shinui, but it still might be enough to make it mutter in this particular case, because it starts out as an Isser D'Rabbanan. Again, the Rabbanan might have said, as long as you do a Shinui, we'll lift our Isser. Okay? Being that it's only Midrabanan, maybe there you only need a lower grade Shinui, the kind where you don't really change the result, just the way that it's done. Okay? That's my theory at this point. But, you know, it definitely needs an inspection, perhaps. All the cases that we're going to read now, we can look at under that light. Okay. Let's see the next Rashi, but if you do it milamala lamata, it's mutter. Why? Starting above and working down below.
To start from the very beginning to put the roof on first. After you start to talk to it's someone to arrange the wooden walls. This is a word. Shari. And that is allowed.
That's mutter. Here Rashi doesn't even repeat the reason. You're supposed to remember the previous Rashi, that the previous case was usher because it is the derech. Rashi set you up to understand this one, that this is mutter because it's not the derech. In other words, it's a shinui. Okay, now, because of that perspective, the next part of the Gemora should be understood within that context. We start the next page now. V'chein be'asa. What's the v'chein?
Even.
No, not even. Likewise. So what will be the likewise without seeing the Rashi even?
Likewise, it was considerable if you pile them on top of each other or if you pile it on
Not necessarily how we're going to arrange the eggs, but we don't know the exact case till we see the Rashi perhaps. So we see there's a case of an egg, where we have a problem of
Thinking.
a top being the God, so to speak, and then something under it being more like the walls. And the V'chein would tell me, just like we said in building a fire, it depends on what the order of events, whether you arrange the top part first and the bottom sort of comes underneath it, or the bottom first and then the top. V'chein, and likewise that could make a big difference in the case of an egg, where an egg might be involved in some kind of a shaila of ohel, which you have to see Rashi specifically see what that is. What would be the v'chein in this case, Surli?
So what we said before about the wood, right?
Just like there, likewise we're saying, no, it could be mutter or usr depending on one factor.
Mutter or usr, so to be a case with the egg, it could be a case with mutter.
Depending on which factor. You tell me what the factor is that you have to be aware of. The v'chein is telling me.
Put the roof on first, then.
That's right. Change the order, right?
Change
Since
the
the
order.
normal order is to put the whatever is below the wall, so to speak, first, and then the roof. If you reverse the order, which is usually the gog part first, and then the wall part, that should make it mutter. That's the v'chein. And likewise, you could make it mutter by changing the order, or it will be usr if you don't change the order in these following cases. Beya, we'll have to see Rashi what that case is, or Kedera. There's something to do with Kedera as well, that you have a problem of walls and then a gog, or gog and then a walls. Somehow when we talk about Kedera, you could have a similar case of that shaila. In one way it will be mutter, one way it will be usr. If you follow the regular order, it will be usr. If you follow a different order, it will be mutter, because of shinui. V'chein puria would mean likewise you'll have the same dichotomy when you want to build a bed, right? We talked about building a bed once before, that you have a kind of the walls of the bed, and you have the part you sleep on is more like the roof of the bed. So it'll depend on what. Whether or not you can do it will depend on what?
Depends on how you build and how the order.
The order, right? Again, the order. If you do the wall part first and then the gog part after, it'll be usr. If you want to do it the other way around, it'll be mutter. V'chein chavisa. And that also has something to do with the barrels. It'll end up being, right? Now some of these we've seen before. The barrels probably is the case we had before in the Mishnah, where you wanted to put a pot on top of two barrels. We said that's usr.
Putting barrels into each other.
So if you do rather, you put the pot first, and then you put the barrels underneath, since the pot was the gog, so to speak, so the barrels were like the walls, so to speak, I assume it means if you switch the order, instead of putting what we normally would do, the barrels first and then the pot on top, you switch around the order. I assume that's what it means, but it could be something different. We have to wait till Rashi to see the exact thing over here. I mean, there's some Rashis here which are a bit long, so maybe my simplistic explanation will fall short, but I'm just getting our minds working in the right direction. Right, we'll have to wait for Rashi in the specifics, but we don't know generally why all these are being added to the list. V'chein this and v'chein that. The general rule is going to be the same, that what? You do it in the traditional order, which would be walls first, then the gog part later, that will be usr. Change around the traditional order, you put the roof part first, and then you shift in the walls to be under it, that will end up being mutter. So same for many, many cases might be under that umbrella, so to speak. Yes, that is correct. Okay, so let's see these specific things now, how Rashi specifically explains all of these things, because I see it's not a simple thing. Rashi has a number of things he wants to say on each of these topics. Let's follow Rashi's lead.
Beitsa.
Just a second. Who's reading what? Are you reading the Rashi's really?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Beitzim gasos. Big eggs.
Okay.
And the lochnes are cleaner, placed on the opening of a vessel. Chalul.
A hollow vessel, right? In other words, like a bottle. So it has an opening at the top and then it's hollow in the middle.
A tripod.
Similar to
Tripod.
right? Some kind of a contraption where you're going to put the egg on top. Maybe to cook even. Maybe it's not just to cover the bottle. I thought of covering a bottle with an egg, which I think we've had that case once before. Maybe it's talking about actually cooking an egg. Maybe there's a way of cooking it by putting it on top of a tripod and letting the heat cook it from underneath. Or some people have a little holder for when they make soft-boiled eggs, right? They put it in a holder and they scoop out.
But why geyser? Why digging?
I guess because it can fit into the contraption, it won't just fall through the hole. So if it's to make it a covering, I understand, because the bigger ones are better to be a cover.
So little eggs you could probably do it.
Huh?
Little eggs you could probably do it. You could cook them.
You can cook them, meaning you can put them to be the top.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's saying gases because little ones would not create a problem, or just that they wouldn't really fit into this contraption. They wouldn't be ones you'd want to use because they're too small, they would fall through. Technically, you'll never get them to stay up at the top of the contraption. They'll fall through. The bigger ones are going to be able to remain at the top. That's just a theory I have. Maybe you're right. Maybe there's no problem with the smaller eggs, or maybe they just won't be practically fitting to the contraption. They'll fall through. In any event. So let's continue on then. No. We have a number of things to still work through in this Rashi. Rashi has quite a lot of things he wants to discuss with us here. Which is, I think, a kind of a griddle of sorts.
Grill?
A grill or a griddle, I'm not sure. But let's see. Don't put that cleat first. And afterwards put the egg on top. Right? Make sure you do it the opposite. Ella. Hold the egg with your hand. Oh no, so it's the other way around. Not hold the Beitsa. Hold the grill. So in a sense you put up the walls already. And then you put the egg on top. Wait, so that doesn't make sense. If the egg was the roof, you're putting the walls first and then the roof.
The roof and the walls.
That's very strange. Rashi says you're going to put the egg on top of it. Sounds like it's already there. You're holding it in your hand and then you're putting it.
Holding the grill in the hand.
Yeah, it's just a whole egg in your hand.
Okay. So what's he holding in his hand? When he says Yochzena biyado, he's holding the Beitsa.
Yeah.
And then Yoshiv ha-Beitsa olav. And then put the Beitsa on top of it.
Yeah.
What's the it?
And the grill.
So the grill is already there?
Must be.
No, because then he says, V'akar kach Yoshiv ha-Kli al ha-Gecholi. Then you put the Kli.
Ah, so you put the egg on the
Put the egg on the contraption, I guess.
And the contraption on the grill, on the corners.
There must be two, I think there's two separate cases. One case is where there's a Kli that's going to go on the Gecholim. You see that afterwards he says put the Kli on the Gecholim. That's like the walls. That creates like the walls. And the egg is like the roof. That's clear. It's saying basically put the egg first and then put the Kli underneath it. Whether that Kli is the tripod, that would make sense, or some other kind of contraption, which is like a grill. But okay, so I'm not sure exactly the previous sentence when he said hold it in your hand and then put the egg on it. I don't know what the it was exactly there, but I think he's definitely saying we have a Kli that's going to be like the walls, which you have to make sure to put afterwards, after the egg is already in position. So somehow you put the the egg in position, and then you put the kli under it. But the first part, he says hold it and put the egg on top of it. I'm not sure what the it is. Maybe it's the contraption, which doesn't create an ohel, but only the kli creates an ohel. I'm not sure. No, I think the kli was. I thought that was the contraption, but. All right. Well, we get the idea. Anytime you have something that should be looked at as the gog, here it's the Beitsa is definitely the gog, and maybe he's saying the egg with something else is the gog. Maybe put something else with the egg, and that is the gog. So maybe he's talking about putting the egg and this other thing together to create a gog, and then underneath that you put a kli, which is like the walls. So I'm not sure what the egg's going together with.
Where's the egg going to be on top of?
What?
Where's the egg going to be on top of?
Oh, the kli. He's calling it the kli that goes on the coals, which is like, I guess, what it's going to be cooking in. That somehow the egg is like a roof to that. Maybe when you take the egg and you put it in a contraption, that is going to be then resting on top of the pot, maybe that's what happens. You take the egg, you put it in some kind of a thing, and then you put that on top of a pot, which is on the coals. So you have the egg and this other thing will create the roof. And he's saying hold that first, hold the egg with that other thing first, and then put the kli on the gecholim under it. That way you create the roof part first, and then the wall part after. That's clearly what he's saying, but I can't quite picture how the egg and the contraption are creating some kind of a roof together, but okay. Let's go on. Where are you reading from now? Where? In Rashi?
In the Rashi.
So you're in the third line of Rashi?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead. Right.
What happens to the grill there?
Maybe that was part of, again, maybe that is with the egg. The egg and the grill are one root thing that's going to be like the roof, and then you put that on top of a kli that's on top of the coals. Maybe it's like, we call it a double burner. What do we call it? A double steamer? A double... Sometimes you cook eggs that way. You put a pot on top of a pot, right? You double cook something, make sure it doesn't get burnt or something. It seems like whatever is holding the egg is going to be together with the egg, the roof. And then there's some kind of pot that goes under that. Anyhow, okay, so clearly, again, Rashi says the main thing we have to concentrate on, even if the details are a bit fuzzy, I'm sorry to say, but the main point is definitely taken. Shelo yasenu. So again, we're telling you to do it in a way that changes the order of the building, so therefore it's a shinui in that respect. The order. Or that's enough of a shinui in this case as well.
Change the order of the building, right?
Right, meaning you put the roof first and then the walls. Whatever you're talking about that has part of it resembling the roof and part of it resembling the walls, make sure to put the roof part first and then the wall part second, if you want it to be much. If you can't quite work it out, then you'd have to do it on coal and not on motive.
Right?
Yeah.
Shemoshvim al beis chodesh. Placing the 2 barrels.
Okay, so this is more like the case we thought where it's talking about like our Mishnah, where the Mishnah said you couldn't do it, couldn't place a pot on top of 2 barrels. Here we're saying, well, maybe you can do it, depends. The idea of putting a pot on top of 2 barrels, so we're saying about that,
No.
Low. Okay. And on the side it says Sarich Lomar Yakifa.
And surround it, right?
Right. Don't make them surround her. Don't cause them to surround the fire. When you put them in place first, don't put the barrels in place first, and only achar kach,
Yeshiva packet there there and put the
pot on top.
What makes it possible?
Yakif, I think. Lahakif means to cause something to be surrounded. That extra yud in the middle is a common way to create the kifur. Okay. So, excuse me. So Ella, rather, if we want to do it, that's the way that's us to put the barrels first and then the pot. Rather, what should you do?
The top part, you slow up here, hang it in the air.
Right, like the pot itself, somehow get it to hang in midair.
Absolutely, we allow you to grab it in the hand. Sajum Chavis Tachter. So you surround all the barrels together, right?
Basically placing the barrels, arranging the barrels afterwards, if you use 2, if you use 3, however many you're using to hold the pot in place. Obviously you want to hold the pot in place, but you don't want the barrels to burn, so somehow you position them in such a way to hold up the pot near the fire, but not exactly in the fire. So therefore, the barrels create a kind of a wall, the wall part, which is like surrounding, and the pot itself is like the roof. So we have the same rule in general. Make sure to reverse the order of events, first the gag and then the wall, and then it becomes mutter. That's the v'chein. Follow the same methodology and you'll make it mutter. And then we have this last case. No, it's actually, there's 2 more cases. A case of Kuria and a case of Torah.
Kuria, sort of bed. Mitos.
Right. Rashi translates it from Aramaic to Hebrew.
Beds are sorry, beds belong to the princess.
Yeah, apparently they're nice beds.
Sure, Hurricane. You take them apart,
Right.
Machzir, and you return them.
And put them back together. We want to put them back together, I guess, on Yom Tov. So the problem is,
Lo Yizko HaKodesh Tchila. You don't put the
Yiskov means
straight.
to stand up straight, to stand up. Stand them up. Don't stand up first the legs of the bed.
Legs of the bed. Says rufus.
Okay, now there's 2 parts, there's only 3 parts of the bed, I suppose. The karaim, which are the actual legs. Then you have the aruchos, which comes from the word long, right? Which I think in English we call the sideboards of the bed. So you have the legs, and then stretching between the legs on each side are the aruchos. One sideboard, the other sideboard, and then they match up to the legs and they create like a box. That creates like the box. Those are like the walls. So don't do that first. Yifros.
Or matzah, right?
Right. What does that mean?
This means to spread out, right?
Right, to spread out. This is what he shouldn't do. He shouldn't put the legs first and then afterwards spread out. Or
Linen.
no, or literally means skin, right? A rofeh or is a dermatologist, skin doctor, right? Or can also mean leather, right? Because leather, even though we don't always think of it that way, is the skin of an animal, right? So, like if, for example, it says when Adam and Chava discovered that they were naked, Hashem made them kasnos or. Some people say it's with an ayin, like leather garments, and some people, I think Rabbi Meir had a gears of kasnos or with an aleph, like made out of light. Okay, but in any event.
Which is why they call it hide.
Okay, very good. I like that. So.
But can I ask a question here?
Let me just finish the thought process here.
Sorry.
So, this or that you're reading about, Sruli, do you know now what part of the bed that is?
Referring to the
What does the word or
mattress.
mean?
Referring to the mattress?
What does the word or mean?
Skin leather.
And which part do you think they use for the they use that?
Long upon
Right. And what is it called in Hebrew?
mattress.
That's English. What's it called in Hebrew? Rashi uses the word. Yifros ha'or
Beitsa.
matzah. Matzah with an ayin, so you have to say it a bit gutturally, so people don't think it's the matzah you eat on Pesach.
Matzah.
Exactly. They actually have another name in modern Hebrew, mizron. But in Chazal, they call it a matzah with an ayin.
We lie on.
Right. Like you said, it's like a mattress of sorts, right? Except they didn't have, apparently, the nice mattress that we have. It's just a stretched out piece of leather. Okay? Which would be like the gog in the formula of Ohel. Okay? So he's saying don't put the feet, which end up having the sideboards, which create the walls, as it were, and then you're going to stretch out between all of that, which is the normal way you'd want to do it. Once you have the frame, you'd stretch out the leather over that frame. That's obviously the much easier way to do it. But instead, you're going to have to do this very awkward thing of holding the leather somehow in midair, as if it were like stretched out on something, but it's going to be on nothing, and then bring in the walls under. Right? That's going to be much harder acrobatics than probably the other parts that we've been reading about. Right? Okay, so he says, that's the part we lie on, so we call it a mattress or whatever. That's what you shouldn't do, that order, but Ella, rather, what should you do? First,
Stretch out
the leather across sort of horizontally, in midair. See, now Rashi has to talk about more than one person being involved, because you try to stretch out a piece of leather in midair by yourself. Not going to work. So Rashi says you're going to have to get a few friends involved over here and all work together, right? Have a few people, at least two people, holding the leather in place horizontally, as if it were the mattress already. And then you can bring the sideboards, which are obviously said before attached to the legs of the bed as well. And then once you have it all in place, you can then right, so you're getting a little mini lesson on how they used to make their beds. But once you have everything in place and you switched around the order, you put first the roof part and then the wall part. Now, how are you going to get the bed to stay together? Rashi said they have these special things called what? Ritzuos shel or. Right? Little straps.
What is the Yeshiva? Is it tied?
They shall tie. It sounds like a knot, but maybe it just means tie in the mutter way to tie things. Onto the frame, right? You're going to take the leather now and it's already stretched out, but probably stretch it a bit tighter and then tie it on to the frame, to the aruchos, the sideboards. Then you can stand up the legs. Right, so you have the sideboards there with the and then you put the leather first, then the sideboards. Now you're going to bring in the legs. I don't know why you couldn't do that before, but okay, whatever. Used to have a bunk bed, I think, very much like this. It would come apart, and you wanted to put it together. It had like little hooks at each end. The sideboards sort of hooked onto the legs. All right, so we've got a little lesson there on how to make beds in the ancient days.
Why does he Shipur Kim? Why does he take them apart and then put them together again? Is that saying that it's a
All the
temporary?
way back to there, huh?
Does that mean that they're temporary, or it must be temporary?
I think it just means like, when would you actually have an opportunity to put together a bed? It wasn't like they bought beds in IKEA. Like Shabbatai had to do once.
Yeah.
You have to arrange a bed.
Yeah. Now you can just buy a robot to put it together for you.
But he specifically says that I get a part and then put it together.
I think because it's almost like diplomats. Imagine a diplomat, right?
Yeah.
And he knows he's going to be going to visit somebody important, right? Takes his bed with him.
Which means it's a temporary bit. It's a temporary.
Yeah, it is temporary.
Is that changed halacha at all? Because we said
First
that-
of all, in my explanation, it works out perfectly. I said the heter here to change the order is only because we're dealing with a durabanan, an oil arai.
Uh-huh.
This would make it more of an oil arai because it's only temporary.
Well, so
perhaps.
maybe that's why I put it in, to just make
Maybe.
the point.
Maybe, yeah, I hear what you're saying. If it's going to be permanent, maybe it wouldn't have the heter. Yeah,
Because
maybe.
beds are permanent. Make your bed and you lie on it.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Excuse the pun.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Perhaps if it was more permanent, we'd lose our heter because then it would become an oil deraisa, and who says that this low-grade shinui of changing the order is going to be enough?
Because there's a lot of words there that are
I
necessary.
hear what you're saying. That's a good point. That's a good point. You may be spending extra time to lay the groundwork, as it were, to that we now know why it's this same heter applies. So in the other case, it's clearly temporary. Like we said, a bonfire is clearly temporary. All these other things are clearly
Most people
temporary.
would say a bed. No,
This
it's not
one is not
permanent.
as temporary, so Rashi maybe had to go out of his way to explain it is. I like that. Very good. Very good. Tell your wife you were.
Tell my
She
wife.
fed you well this morning.
Not quite.
You make your own lunch.
Last night? She fed you last night?
Well, no, not
Shabbos?
Yeah.
Alright, whenever she fed you, she fed you.
Yeah, the challenge was good.
Tell her, I noticed the children was good.
And that is called.
Alright, so we've handled everything so far except the last case, which I thought we knew as the two barrels and the pot. Rashi said that was a case of pots. We said Cain B'Kedera, that it's going to make it mutter to change the order. That was talking about like the case of the barrels in the pot of the Mishnah. So now we're saying, and also with barrels, what kind of case of barrels do we have left? Let's see the last case in Rashi then, B'chein Chavisa. This is a whole different case, one case we haven't seen yet.
Chen chavisa, so to the barrel. Chavios, shemasadim ba'avir ba'otzar.
Mm-hmm.
Arrange them in a sort of
Storage
storage.
facility, right? Like they used to keep it in their basement or whatever. Like a cellar, a wine cellar or whatever. Like Gemora Pesachim talks about how do you check, talks about how they used to arrange the barrels one on top of the other. So if you have to place a number of barrels in your storehouse, let's say you brought a few barrels up for the meal, and after the meal there were a few barrels left over, right? Not as many of your friends showed up. That bag, it looks like it's falling off the table. So if you're going to go ahead and put back the barrels after the meal and it's still Yom Tov, you have to be careful, right? Because what would you like to do? Shemoshivin. No. Rashi. Shemoshivin. Sorry, Umoshivin.
Achas al gabe shtayim.
The normal way you stack barrels is you put a whole row, and the next row, how do you set it up to be strong and not fall down?
Behind, right?
No, what's Rashi saying?
Put them on top.
How do you read it again?
What?
Read it again?
Yeshiva and Achaz are put one on top of two.
Oh. Let's say I have 10. I'm not just going to come and put another 10 on top of the first 10. That's not going to make it sturdy. That's not going to stabilize it. How do you stabilize it to make sure you can stack it up?
One on top of two.
So when I get to the very end of my row, and I have 2 there, I can't just put one on top of the other, and I'm going to have to take the last 2 and put one on top of that one. So basically, if I have a certain amount of space, the first row will have 10, and the second row will have how many?
Less, right?
Less, right? Because I have to put, at the last two, I can only put 1. And the first two also only 1. And so I'm minimizing it by at least 4, perhaps. Maybe it's going to be half, maybe 5. I don't know. Maybe it's not
2
so.
on top of 1, and 2 and 1 directly on top.
Well, I have 10 altogether. So the last two I know how to deal with it. The last two I put 1 between the last 2.
Yes.
Now the next one I have, I'm going to do the same thing, but it's much easier now because half of the top barrel is into half of the 8th barrel or 9th barrel. So now I'm going to have an easier job of putting in between the next two.
5, right?
And it's going to be less. It's going to be less. You have to make the cheshbon exactly how much less. It's not going to be 5. It's going to be less than 10. Okay, so I'd want to do that. Am I going to be allowed to do that on Yom Tov?
Yes.
No. No, because that is like an ohel, Rashi's saying. Just like the case of the pot, where I wanted to take 2 barrels and put a pot on top. He said you can't. It's like walls and a roof. So what am I going to do? So that's why the v'chein is important. What's the v'chein? We said v'chein means what? Just like in the first case.
So if you do like say the opinion, it's awesome.
Right, but if you
Do it differently.
right, and the different way is specifically in all these cases to put the roof part first, the upper thing first, and then the bottom. So now it'll have to be a bit, like it's be different, I can't just put a layer of 10 and then on top of that a bunch that are less, because I can't do that. I'm going to have to, if I want to have 1 on top of 2, I'm going to have to hold that 1 in place and shove in 2 underneath it. So I'm going to have to be very crafty how I do this, because it's going to be very hard. I can't just put 1 layer and then another layer and another layer and another layer, even if I'm going to be, because that's usher, to put the bottom and then the top. So I have to put the top first. How am I going to do the top first? At the very end, where I'd want to have the last 9 and 10, that barrel 9 and barrel 10, have on top of it the next row between 9 and 10. I can't do that. I have to hold that barrel in place, and then shove in barrel 9 and barrel 10 underneath it. And then each one I'm going to do the same thing. So it's going to be a very strange arrangement here. Every time we're going to have those servants holding the top barrel and throwing 2 underneath it. And then they hold another barrel and throw 2 underneath it. Another barrel, throw 2 underneath it. That's what we're going to have to do the whole time. Right? Obviously, you have to pay your servants a bit extra to do all that. Alright. So we have all the cases that were all based on the same idea, but they're different, I guess, degrees of Chiddush in all of that. And now we're back to the... I personally would have put 2 dots at the end of the first line of the Gemora, all of the v'cheins together, period. And now there's another thing that was mentioned in the Mishnah, what?
There's another v'chein coming.
Sorry?
There's another v'chein
Where?
at the end of the second line.
Yeah, but that's what I'm trying to point out.
Right.
The end of the first line is really the end of a subject.
Right.
Now we have a new thing. What's be'ein somchim as a kadera because?
We don't
Do
put
you remember we had that once before?
in the Mishnah.
In the Mishnah. So it's like quoting the Mishnah all over again. So it's not just an additional thing that's going to have a v'chein. It might have another v'chein coming at the end. But we're starting basically reopening the Mishnah now. Let's go back to the Mishnah and look at this case. Okay? So what was that case? Let's just look at it one more time to get it straight. Ein son kedera bebikas. Rashi said, kasavar. What does kasavar mean?
He holds.
Which usually means what?
Tsama?
No, when Rashi says somebody's kasavar,
Like the father.
what?
You say not av. That's savar.
Savar means he holds a shita. He holds a svara. He holds a logic.
It holds it like Tsama.
No, but it's not like. It's not the kuf. The kuf is not like. The kuf just means in fact.
So according to Torah,
Well, that's you see the little balli of the Gilyon Shas, that ball that has like a little bit of white in it, in the Rashis of the Mishnah.
Yep.
No, in the Rashis of the Mishnah. Look in the wrong place.
yeah.
Rashis of the Mishnah. So it's like Be'erech, maybe 8 lines above where the Gemora in Rashi starts. You see where the Gemora in Rashi starts? Like the second to last skinny line in Rashi. You have a big Gimel Mem there in the Rashi. Second to last skinny line in Rashi, before the wider lines of Rashi. So 8 above that. The Ein Somkin Kader, maybe more like 10 above that.
Okay, I got it.
Okay.
Kasavar, okay, good.
Which means what? Kasavar therefore means what?
He holds.
He holds. Which implies what? Rashi usually says that when he wants to bring to our attention what? Any thoughts? Whoever wrote this Mishnah, right, holds this, but to imply what? Somebody else holds differently. It implies that there's a maklokas sinoim in this case. And that's, if you were talking about a Gemora, I would say it's implying a maklokas amoraim. If he's talking here about the Mishnah and a Tana who wrote the Mishnah, he's implying that there's another Tana somewhere who will argue with this. And so, whether or not we ever meet up with that other Tana, we may not. Maybe Rashi just knew about it because he knew all of Shas. But at least we can appreciate one thing, that what he's about to mention, whatever he's kasavar, is a controversial thing. Even if we never see the other side of the coin, the other fellow who holds differently. But Rashi, by saying kasavar, is like saying, you know what makes him say this? Because he holds a special shita that not everybody holds, by the way. So what's Rashi saying he holds? What does that mean?
Placing the wood for fire.
Placing wood, what does that mean, placing wood?
Using the walls to make a fire. For burning.
No. Here, Nasnu, you know who Nasnu are? The Rabbanan.
Only place to work.
Meaning they only gave you the right to use wood for burning, right? In other words, you could say a piece of wood on Yom Tov. How do we look at that piece of wood? Do we look at that piece of wood as muksa, not muksa? Like a rock is muksa. Normally a piece of wood is muksa. But here, it's Yom Tov. So how do we look at that? So we say, no, it's not really muksa, but it's one of those things that we say, they only gave you permission to use it for one thing. I think we spoke about this once before. We were talking about the 8 seam sheba muktzah. Yes. And there were 8 seams spread around, and did he let you stack them up? He didn't let you stack them up. We had this whole question before about Asaka and one other thing. What was the other thing you talked about?
It was outside in the forest or inside an enclosure.
Yeah, but also Rashi mentioned 2 things. I remember we made a whole big thing there. He mentioned Hasaka. Yes. There was one other need.
There were wood that was scattered and wood that was carved.
Yeah, but what you were going to use them for 2 things, I remember we had there. Hasaka was one of them, and then there's this other thing. Okay, yeah, okay. There definitely are sugyas that we could review to have a bigger clarity in what Rashi's saying here, but okay. That's all they let you use it for, in other words. Chazal were very careful. You can use wood on Yom Tov, but only for this reason. And why do I need to know that? Rashi says, why is that important here? Muksin hain, they're a special kind of muksa. It's like a limited muksa. Not complete muksa, because that means you can't use it for anything. But you can use it for something. But it's only one specific thing that they let you use it for. So regarding everything else, they have a din of muksa. Right? That's what it says. They let you use it for a sukkah, but they are muksa regarding what? Etzel. Kol tashmish, regarding all of the usages. So I'd like to take a piece of wood and use it, let's say, to support the pot. So I can cook something, right? Put one board here and one board there. Can I do that?
The only way for us to burning means I think you could.
No, because I'm not using them for burning. I'm using them to support a pot. And by the way, now I understand why Rashi said kasavar. See why Rashi said kasavar?
Yeah.
Because Rashi wants me to know what?
So we're only getting permission for burning.
But he says kasavar. He's adding that point.
Because it's an argument between Rabbanim and Tanakh and...
Well, whoever. There are certain Tanoim that we're not necessarily privy to their names right now. Maybe if we review properly, we'll see their names. But one thing we know Rashi's hinting at is that something we're seeing in the Gemora here may not have all Tanoim agreeing on this issue. And what specifically would there be their argument? That when Chazal said you're allowed to use wood on Yom Tov, the argument would be, some Tanoim say, like Rashi's saying here, they hold what? That wood
only for burning.
is only allowed to be used for burning. That's all they let you. It's like a special heter. Regarding that, it's mutter, but everything else is like muksa. Or there's another Tana somewhere that says no, they let you use it for more than one usage, cooking and whatever, some other usages, whatever they may be. Maybe all of the usages, or maybe also a limited, but more than just burning. So there's a machlokus in that point. But Rashi says, being that our Tana holds like that, that would explain in our Mishnah why you're not allowed to what? Somchim HaKodesh babikas. You can't support the Kedera with a block of wood. Bikas is a block of wood, right? Which means just like you're not allowed to use 2 chavios, and why couldn't I use 2 chavios? Because that's like making an ohel. And we even learned, because of that, if you change the order, it does become mutter. But you can't take a block of wood and do it because of a whole different reason. Because Rashi says, here it has nothing to do with ohel. Here it has to do with a special shita about, is wood muksa on Yom Tov or not? And everyone seems to agree regarding burning of wood, it's not muksa. That's mutter. But regarding anything else, this Tana holds is not. So therefore you can't just use it to support your pot. Whatever. Okay.
I seem to remember that wood that was outside an enclosure, if it was piled, you could use it. Inside the enclosure, even if it was scattered, you could use it.
Yeah, there was a whole discussion about that. Remember, there was a machlokus and the question about how to, how far away from the city it was, or something like that.
That's right.
And I can't remember if the issue was muksa there. Seemed like we were talking about regular piece of wood that had once been like part of a man's inventory, but they got scattered, or these are wild pieces of wood that were never part of a man's inventory. I can't remember that part of that case. Okay, we'll have to review that case. We know it. Okay, but what I'm trying to point out is that we should just realize that this is a quote from the Mishnah, which is radically different than the sugi we were learning a minute ago. A minute ago we were talking about how to create an ohel in a way that's mutter, the gog, and then the this and that. And that's the case of chavios and kedera in our Mishnah. When it says v'chein ein somchim the kedera babikas, it's a whole different ballgame. Rashi says it has nothing to do with oil. It has to do with the question of muksum. Is the wood muksum? For this particular thing, this kind of holds its muksum. So now, this v'chein v'delis is the same thing, right? It's not of the same thing v'chein like we had a minute ago. Oh, this is going to be mutter, and this is going to be mutter if you change the order. This is quoting the Mishnah again. Just like we had ein somchin as a kedera babikas v'chein v'delis, if you look back in the Mishnah as well.
Yes, yes.
So theoretically, we're saying you can't use a door to support a pot that you want to cook, right? Because according to the way Rashi explained the first thing, it's muksa. Let's see if Rashi explains it here in the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, Rashi says v'chein bedelis.
Bedelis. Self-adaptive, what?
Rashi in the Mishnah said v'chein bedelis.
Hashta mashma plus.
No. Hashta mashma means it's like saying now at this point before we're told anything extra in the Gemora. The Havamin, in other words, the normal way of approaching these words would be to understand what? That it says v'chein in the Mishnah, that I'm saying, just like I told you a minute ago, you can't be somech the Kedar on a bikas because it's muksa. Rashi just said v'chein the delis. We're thinking at this point that it's the same idea because it says v'chein, right? That you can't support a Kedera with it. But Rashi says the Gemora is going to what? Ask. Okay, and that's what we're seeing right now. So this really is a whole new section. I really would have put 2 dots, mamish at the end of the first line of the Gemora, because this is a whole new ball game. We're going back to the Mishnah. We're talking about a part where it said you can't use wood because it's muksa, Rashi said, to support the pot. And then it says v'chein bedelis. We think we're talking about the same thing. We're not allowed to use a wooden door. The same idea.
So that's
now it's understood. Meaning, it's like saying now the Gemora thinks one thing, but that's going to spark a question, which is going to lead to the truth. It's almost implying this is not the real pshat. But before we get to the Gemora, which is going to really ask a question and get to the real pshat, our understanding with just the simple words of the Mishnah is, if it says v'chein bedelis, it means the same thing I just told you about a bikas. You can also not do it with a delis. You cannot use it to support your pot. Rashi said, but the Gemara is going to ask on that because that doesn't quite make sense. Okay? So let's see the Gemara. So the Gemara is just quoting the Mishnah, really, right? Those 2 things are just quotes from the Mishnah. Ain't some kind of Gedera bikas v'chein bedelis. So I would have put 2 dots before and after that to show you that we're now just going back to the Mishnah and dutifully explaining the Mishnah. But says the Gemora on that, like Rashi promised. Who's reading the Gemora?
Okay. Something it Kedera b'kiya. V'chein bedelis.
Now the Gemora is asking on that.
Very
good. It's a question, correct. You read it as a question.
Don't get it into your mind.
No. It's asking a rhetorical question.
Oh.
Do you really think? Saul Kadai is saying, does it really go up in your mind?
Right.
In other words, could it ever really occur to you that a guy's going to use his door to support his pot that's cooking on the fire? It's a door. Why would a person do that? Let's see how Rashi explains the question before we go on. I would say, like, who's the idiot who would be somech a kedera on a door? Right. I guess pots were very heavy and doors were very, fragile. Maybe not like today where you have very strong hinges and stuff. Could break. Which apparently doors in those days could break very easily. So you want to support a pot on top of a door? What are you, crazy? Rashi's saying nobody would do that because it would break. Who's going to chance that it's going to break? Who would do that? You don't have to write a Mishnah not to do something that an insane person would do, but not a normal person, right? If any normal person knows not to do it, then I don't have to write it into a Mishnah, don't do it. Right? So therefore there must be another pshat in this Mishnah which would include normal people. What are they telling a normal person? Ella, rather, you know what the pshat is?
I would say likewise a door.
V'chein hadelet. So what's he changing? Instead of badelet, hadelet. Changing it from a base to a hay. That's pretty subtle. I don't think without the Gemora explaining me the difference, I would have caught the difference. You say v'chein badelis, you say v'chein hadelis. But if you say Kain Hadelis, everything fits in. The Gemara's happy. You say Kain Badelis, the Gemara's like, what? Who would do that? So I don't get what's different, but let's see Rashi. Maybe Rashi will explain. What do we gain by saying Hadelis instead of Badelis?
Kain Hadelis, and something also Bakas.
It's not that you want to take a Kedera and put it on top of the door like you did on top, like you wanted to do on top of the block of wood. No, nobody would do that. What it's saying is, don't support your door with. Read it again. Read Rashi again.
The roof.
Read Rashi again. Read it again.
The Bakas means
Read the Rashi. The Chain Hadelis tells you what?
Chain Hadelis, it's something also Bakas.
That you can't what? Be somech a door with a block of wood. If you want to somehow support a door. Maybe a person has a door and he doesn't have proper hinges, so you'd like to take a block of wood, like maybe a block of wood isn't so big, it's a smaller, right, 2x4 or something, right? And put it underneath the door to support it, right? Do you ever have that where something's not quite fitting, and if you wedge something under it, it'll make it the right height? Like sometimes the door of the leg of a table, right, is wobbling, so you shove something under there just to keep it the right level, right? Maybe the same thing with a door. You could have a door that's wobbly or not fitting properly, and you shove a block of wood under there and it makes it sturdy, right? Fit in properly. So that's what we're saying. Not that you'd want to support a Kedera with a Delis. Nah. The Gemara's right. Nobody would do that. But what does it mean, V'chein Hadelis? Don't even think to support your Delis with a Bikas. For the same reason as the other one. Because Rashi said, this Tana holds that if you want to use wood on Yom Tov, uno. There's only one usage.
The Mishnah says Vaderet.
Yes, but we're saying there was either a mistake that crept in or to understand it as if it wrote Hadelis. So it's not telling you support a Kedera with that thing. It's telling you that thing also, you can't support it with a Bikas. You can't support a Kedera with a Bikas. And likewise a door you can't support with a Bikas. Because Bikas is a block of wood, and wood only has one purpose on Yom Tov, and for regarding any other usage, it's muksa. Shkoya.